All right, everybody. Once again, welcome back to the Everything Firearms Podcast. I think we'll have to come up with a different name for that coming up here soon. But we're back here again. This is Will here with Darryl once again joining us, and we got a lot of fun stuff to discuss this week. Last week we had at the end of the podcast we said if anybody had any topics or any discussion points they wanted us to talk about, to leave a comment down below. And a fellow channel YouTuber, gun store, I don't know exactly what they are, Shoot Straight LLC. I think after Darryl was chatting with him a little bit, he referred to himself as Chuck. So Chuck says, "You both seem to talk considerably about firearms from a hunting perspective. Topics I would be interested in hearing about are as followed. The first one is both of your top 3 to 5 cartridges and rifles that you think can be effective for all game-sized animals in North America. Number two, the idea of flatter shooting and debunking some of the myths about faster bullet, the flatter shooting. And number three, the topic of wildcatting has come up on the last 2 podcasts. I was wondering if you could devote more time to that and maybe share any experience that you have with wildcatting or plans to wildcat. Excellent job, gentlemen, and shoot straight." Well, once again, thank you for all that. We can definitely get into that. Your first one, we constructed some Excel sheets of our top 5 cartridges. I don't know if should call it our top five, but we had a little bit of fun with it. I don't know if these are our top 5 cartridges and what we would like if we could only own five. I think we looked at this from the perspective of hunting game-sized animals in North America. So we have our lists here. I guess I will start. Let me figure out how to share the screen here. Share to right here. Okay. Can you see the screen? I imagine you probably can.
Yep, looks good on my end, Will.
Alrighty. So, my first cartridge, I thought, well, if we're looking at taking something of North American sized game, um, we could do. I didn't think about the squirrel small game from a squirrel rabbit perspective. I thought of anything from a groundhog up to a grizzly bear. So everything you'll see on here is different areas about small game, medium sized game, the larger stuff, and then a versatile cartridge. So, um, just to kind of keep things simple here, I got 3 different cartridges here that are all in the same kind of uh, category, the same bullet, 55 grain Sierra Blitz King. That's actually what I shoot out of my 223. I've reloaded that, so I have a 22 250. I'm doing a little bit of load development with that, and then I honestly make that into a 22 250 Ackley improved. But so what you're seeing here from the 223 Remington 55 grain Sierra Blitz King, you're going to get recoil of about 3.5 foot-pounds. That's very negligible. Um, that's not too like that. Any shooter, whether they're an experienced shooter or they are a beginner, first time shooting, that's not going to bother them. They're not going to flinch. They're not going to see any kind of effectiveness to their shooting unless they're anticipating some kind of recoil. But once they get used to it, they're not going to see any kind of degrade to their shooting, in my opinion. So then you get to the 22 250. You're about doubling that 3.5 foot-pounds to a whopping 6 foot-pounds. That's really hitting your shoulder. Once again, not you might flinch the first time you shoot it if you're a beginner. Um, but after over time, you're going to see it's not going to beat down on your shoulder. You're not going to see any kind of impact from recoil. And then obviously the 22-250 Ackley improved. We'll get to that. But if you look at this from the perspective of like a predator or a varmint type round, these numbers with the 223, you are getting honestly great. It's plenty for varmints. It's plenty for a predator from a coyote, bobcat, fox, whatever you want to look at. If you're going to do this, make sure it's legal. If you need a fur taker license or if you need a hunting license to do this in your jurisdiction, make sure you do that. But starting with the 223 Remington, these are all starting at a sighting it in for 200 yards. That seems to be what the factory guys like to do it. So at the muzzle, you're getting 3,200 feet per second, energy 1,262. No drop is available because it's at the muzzle. 100 yards, 2,846 feet per second, 989 foot-pounds of energy, and you're 1.5 inches high. 200 yards where your zero is, 2,502 feet per second, an energy of 764 foot-pounds. Obviously, like I said, that's where your zero is. 300 yards, 2,168 feet per second, 574 foot-pounds of energy, and a drop of 7 inches based upon whatever their numbers are. I don't know if they list the windage, but I'm sure it's under optimal circumstances. 400 yards, 1,850 feet per second, energy of 1,418 foot-pounds, 23 inches of drop, and these are all out of the 24-inch barrel. Then you get to the 22-250. You get, once again, that hard hitting recoil of 6 foot-pounds. Really hard on your shoulder. No, I'm kidding. But you got 3,600 feet per second at the muzzle, 1,583 foot-pounds of energy. No noticeable drop because it's at the muzzle. You're starting to begin the arc. 100 feet or 100 yards, 3,268 feet per second, 1,305 foot-pounds of energy, and you're going to be 1 inch high. 200 yards, 2,977 feet per second, 1,082 foot-pounds of energy, and then that's your zero. 300 yards, 2,618 feet per second, 836 foot-pounds of energy, and 6 inches of drop. One or the 223 is dropping 1 inch less. But you get when you consider the extra feet per second, you're going to get flatter shooting. Then you get to the 400 yards, 2,260 feet per second. You still have the energy of 624 foot-pounds with 18 inches of drop. That's very flat shooting, as we'll see as we go down the line here. And then the one that I'm picking, based upon ballistics, because you're really maximizing performance. And I really think if you're going to hunt varmints with a 22 caliber or predators, this would be my recommendation just from the perspective of availability. Now, I'm going to hear some people bring up the 22 Creedmoor because it will beat the 22 250. Well, once you Ackley it, then you're going to see that distance drop, and the availability of the 22 250 Ackley is, I still think at this point in time, it's higher because there's still not that many companies chambering for 22 Creedmoor. Um, I think Horizon's still about the only one. I don't know if any of the big box manufacturers are. I could be wrong about that. But these numbers are very similar to what the 22 Creedmoor is doing. So you got 3,800 feet per second at muzzle, 1,763 foot-pounds of energy. Once again, no drop because you're at the muzzle. You're starting to begin the arc up. 100 yards, 3,410 feet per second, 1,400 foot-pounds of energy, and you're 1.5 inches high. 200 yards, 3,150 feet per second, 1,211 foot-pounds of energy, and that's your zero. 300 yards, 2,815 feet per second, 967 foot-pounds of energy, and it's your flattest shooting out to 300 yards of 5 inches of drop. And then 400 yards, you have 2,420 feet per second, 730 foot-pounds of energy, and 16 inches of drop. You're starting to see a bit noticeable there between the 223 and the 22 250. And I only took this out to 400 because I think 95% of what people are going to be doing, they're going to be within 400 yards and in. Um, when you start to get past that, especially with energy on like a 22 caliber, you're dropping so low in the energy department that it's the topic of ethics, in my opinion, at least comes into consideration, especially from an energy standpoint. The bullet expansion, you're starting to get down towards that 2,000 feet per second, which is where some people think is what is needed to expand some bullets. So that's just my opinion of uh, keeping everything with 400 yards and especially if there's somebody who's a newer shooter or somebody who's looking to get into this, your experience level is probably lower. So you probably don't have the skills yet to shoot past 400 yards. So this is just trying to keep it ethical. Um, so at least for me, my recommendation would be the 22 250 Ackley improved because you can get it. If you can't find it, you can find a 22 250 off the rack at your local gun shop. You can get it chamber reamed. You can order a barrel for it. You have multiple different ways you could go if you're looking to get into predator environment hunting. It's kind of the king in my opinion. But the next round, and I think the one we're going to have the most fun with, is where you're jumping into that 6 millimeter or 244 to your 6.5 Creedmoor, your 25 caliber bullets. These are all kind of lumped together. Some of you might look at me and say, no, this is not a fair comparison for the 243 Winchester. And I understand that. It's the when you look at the case capacity for this and a 25-06, you're going to say, no, that's not a fair comparison. But I kind of wanted to keep it in three, and it's these all seem to, based upon availability, the three in that kind of arena. So, based upon the bullet diameter. So we'll start with the 243 Winchester, a 100 grain Winchester PowerPoint. This is where it got a little bit different, trying to find bullets to match because they're different calibers, so you're going to have different grains. I tried to get everything as closely as possible. But the 243 Winchester, 100 grain Winchester PowerPoint, you're going to have 8.5 foot-pounds of recoil. That's minimal. It's not going to be enough to affect most shooters. You're looking at velocity of the muzzle, 2,960 feet per second. Um, I think I pointed this out, but the green means it's the best. The orange is it's in the middle, and the red is the worst. It's kind of weird that we're seeing the 243 in the orange there. That's kind of a little bit weird, especially in a 100 grain bullet. But to go down to 100 yards, 2,697 feet per second, 1,615 foot-pounds of energy, and you're 1.5 inches high. 200 yards, 2,449 feet per second, 1,332 foot-pounds of energy, and that's where you're zeroing this rifle in at. 300 yards, 2,215 feet per second, 1,089 foot-pounds of energy, and 7.5 inches of drop. 400 yards, 1,993 feet per second, 882 foot-pounds of energy, and then you're at 21 inches of drop. So, once again, here, 100 grain Winchester PowerPoint. 100 grain is kind of your standard, between 90 and 100 grains for most people who use a 243 for deer hunting. Um, Once again, 400 yards, the ethics of it, I think you're still going to get bullet expansion, but the energy, um, that's a big debate. Um, I think you can do it. I wouldn't. necessarily, in my opinion. It wouldn't be my first choice, but you can do it. Next we'll move up to the top here to the trusty 6.5 Creedmoor. And the bullet, what we chose there is 120 grains of the Federal Trophy Copper. Recoil on the 8-pound rifle, you're getting 11 and a half foot-pounds. Now, Daryl, as you know, the Federal Trophy Copper, that's a pretty decent hunting bullet. That's a fair representation for this, especially 20 grains higher than the 243.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
we're not it's not like I'm not giving it a fair chance here. But 0 yards, 2,910 feet per second, you're 50 feet slower than the 243. Energy is 2260. We expect it to be have higher energy. And then no noticeable drop because once again you're on the arc. 100 feet per second, 2,650 feet per second, 1,889 foot-pounds of energy, 1.5 inches high at 100 yards. 200 feet per second, still slower at 2,430 feet per second. You're only 19 feet per second slower, but you're still slower out to 200 yards. 1,605 foot-pounds of energy. And then you have that you're zero in at the 200 yards. Now it starts to pass it at 300 yards, 2,250 feet per second, 1,320 foot-pounds of energy, and a 9-inch drop. You are, what, 101 feet per second faster? Now you might be able to make that up with reloading. This is all based on factory ammunition, but that's where we're at. 400 yards, 2008 feet per second, 1,115 foot-pounds of energy, 22 inches of drop. Now that's a little shocking in my opinion, at least, because I've always heard that the 6.5 Creedmoor is the ballistics king nowadays, but that's just my opinion on it. Based upon what the numbers are seeing, I don't think it's the ballistics king that people like to say it is, but that's just putting that out there. And then you get to the recommendation with all the green, the 25-06, and we're using 110 grain Hornady ELDX, the low drag. You're getting, I think, your highest, yeah, by half a pound of 12 foot-pounds of recoil. Still very minimal. You're starting to get a little bit noticeable for newer shooters. I mean, I don't think it's going to affect an experienced shooter, but you're going to start to notice it a little bit. 0 yards, 3,200 feet per second, 2,410 foot-pounds of energy. Um, no drop because it's the arc. 100 yards, 2,961 feet per second, 2,110 foot-pounds of energy, and you're 1 inch high at 100 yards. 200 yards, 2,766 feet per second, 1,833 foot-pounds of energy, and you're zeroed in um, at 200 yards. You're roughly 500 foot-pounds of energy higher than the 243. Obviously, you have a bigger case, more powder capacity, but then you go up here, you are 228 foot-pounds of energy higher than your 6.5 Creedmoor. That's enough to make a difference in my opinion. 300 yards, 2,580 feet per second, energy of 1,605 foot-pounds of energy, 6 inches of drop. That's the flattest shooting one so far. 400 yards, 2,410 feet per second, 1,375 foot-pounds of energy. You still have plenty of feet per second for expansion. You still have plenty of energy to kill a deer. And then you have 18 inches of drop. That's very flat shooting. I think I know which one I'm taking, at least in my opinion. 25-06. Now we start to have a little bit of fun here. We are getting into the range of the 270, the 30-06, the 308. These are some of the more versatile, what you're if you walk out and talk to hunters on the first day of hunting season here in the great state of Pennsylvania, you're most likely going to find people with these three calibers if they haven't switched over to the 6.5 Creedmoor. I guarantee you, if you go on state game lands, you're going to find somebody hunting with a 270. You're definitely going to find somebody hunting with a 30-06, and you're definitely going to find somebody hunting with a 308 Winchester. But we'll start with the 308. Now, obviously, it's the baby aught six, as some people like to call it, because that's its parent case. Still a great gun. All of these are great calibers. If that's what you hunt with and you're successful with it, I'm not knocking anything here. But the 308 Winchester, just based on ballistics, you get 16 foot-pounds. You're starting to get into that medium recoil, starting to get a little more noticeable. 0 yards, 2,750 foot-pounds or feet per second. Energy of 2,519 foot-pounds, and then no drop. 100 yards, 2,536 feet per second. 2,142 foot-pounds of energy. One in 0.6 inches high. We can call that 1.5. 200 yards, 2,332 feet per second. Energy of 1,811 foot-pounds of energy, and then you have 0 inches because that's your zero. 300 yards, 1,952 feet per second. Foot-pounds of energy is 1,269, and you're at 14.3 inches of drop. Obviously, it's red, so that's where we're going to see the worst. 400 yards. Feet per second of 1,778 feet per second. Energy is at 1,052 and 32.3 inches of drop. That's almost 3 feet. That's quite that's quite a lot, in my opinion. Obviously, you're talking a 150 grain bullet, so that's where a lot of that comes in. You're not push. You're losing a lot of your energy or your feet per second. You're losing 1,000 feet per second roughly. Your energy's dropped almost 1,500, so you're going to see it drop. You're going to see harder or less hard penetration. The energy's not going to be there, and then you might run into expansion issues. I like I said, I've never shot out to that 500 to really test the expansion of a bullet. But once again, a lot of people say once you start to get under 2,000, you start to run into some issues depending upon your bullet construction. So just keep that in mind. Now we'll go to the 270 Winchester. The 270 Winchester is a very um, dear cartridge to me. My main hunting rifle is a 30-06, but you'll see something very interesting here, which will point to Shoot Straight LLC's second question about the myth of faster shooting equals flatter. So the 270, 150 grain Browning SPs, 21 foot-pounds of recoil, still manageable. Nothing, that's not anything that people won't struggle with. If you're a younger person or if you're a female who's recoil sensitive, you may want to look at the 25-06 or something else. But at muzzle, 2,850 feet per second, 2,706 foot-pounds of energy, no noticeable drop, obviously because of the arc beginning. 100 yards, 2,590 feet per second, 2,235 foot-pounds of energy, 1.5 inches high. 200 yards, 2,346 feet per second, 1,833 foot-pounds of energy. No noticeable drop. 300 yards, 2,114 feet per second. Energy of 1,489 foot-pounds and 6 inches of drop. That's your flattest shooting of these three. 400 yards, 1,896 feet per second. 1,198 foot-pounds of energy and 18 inches of drop. Once again, your flattest shooting. That's a that's a big debate. Which one's flatter shooting, the 30-06 or the 270? The ballistics will tell you the 270, and if we're going out the distance, that's my choice. 30-06, 150 grain Browning SPs, 23 foot-pounds of energy. Once again, foot-pounds of recoil. I'm sorry. Zero, 3,000 feet per second, 2,988 foot-pounds of energy. You're still in the ballpark. That's very close. No noticeable drop. 2,735 feet per second, 2,492 foot-pounds of energy, 1 inch high. 200 yards, 2,486 feet per second, 2,058 foot-pounds of energy, and that's your zero. 300 yards, 2,250 feet per second, 1,686 foot-pounds of energy, 12 inches of drop. That's your second best in terms of flattest shooting. 400 yards, 2,027 feet per second, 1,368 foot-pounds of energy, and 28 inches of drop. That's a big gap there. That's why I'm starting to say if you're getting into distance, I'm taking the 270 because you're right there. You're separated. And once again, these numbers the gap can be closed based upon reloading because you can really soup something up. You can really add on to the energy. You can, not saying the 270 will ever match it in closer range, but um, I'm just saying those two are neck and neck. Um, and then when you start to talk about the 270 with the new barrel options that are coming out, you that's a very interesting topic. But just for the video, I'm going to say the 30-06. You can never go wrong with the 30-06 for deer. You got all the bullet options if you're reloading. You're not getting the flatter shooting, but if you're staying within 300 yards, 400 yards, well, I'd say 300 yards, you can't, like I said, they're neck and neck. I'm not going to downgrade one. Um, I shoot a 30-06. I've really considered the 270 a lot, especially after looking at it more, getting a faster twist rate barrel. You can really do some stuff with that. So choose whichever one is your cup of tea. And then cartridge four. I thought we'd have a little bit of fun. If we're going after the grizzly bear, if we're going after the elk or the moose, let's do what everybody else wants to do and let's go get a magnum. So we have some magnums here. The 7 millimeter Remington Magnum 160 grain TSX. Once again, that's a very good bullet. 22 foot-pounds of energy. That's very manageable for these Magnum cartridges. I was shocked by that number. But at muzzle, 2,940 feet per second, a whopping 3,071 foot-pounds of energy. That is plenty for a deer. That is plenty for an elk, a mule deer, whatever you want to use it for. That's plenty. 100 yards, 2,702 feet per second, 2,595 foot-pounds of energy. You're about 1.64 inches high. 200 yards, 2,477 feet per second, 2,180 foot-pounds of energy. And then you have your zero at 200. 300 yards, feet per second, 2,262. Foot-pounds of energy is 1,819, and you only have 7.33 inches of drop. But this right here is where I was shocked. You have the amount of drop between this 100 yards. You're really starting to slow down a little bit, but you still have the feet per second is still over 2,000. The energy is still at 1,500. I think. Now, don't quote me on this. Darryl will be the better one to answer this, but isn't don't they recommend you be around 1,600 foot-pounds of energy for an elk?
Yeah, it's in that 15 to 16 ballpark. Um, Obviously, there's a couple of ways of looking at that. I was never one to subscribe to that energy, number because Townsend Whalen, the guy famous for coming up with like the 35 Whalen cartridge, uh, he's the one that famously said you need like 1,000 pounds of energy to reliably anchor a deer. Well, we shoot deer with 357 Magnum revolvers with 500 foot-pounds of energy, and we knock them down all the time. So obviously, it it's a good number to shoot for. Like, if you're in that power factor and you put the bullet close to where it needs to go, you're probably putting the animal down.
Yeah.
But if I've got something that is within on an elk 800 to 1,000, because 44 Magnum out of a revolver, no one's going to say that's not going to put an elk down if you can get in range to do it. 1,000 pounds of energy at the muzzle with some of your heavier loads. Um, if I'm pushing those numbers and I know I can put that bullet right where I want it, I'd take the shot because shot placement's really what's going to
Yeah.
take that animal down. But
Yep.
yeah, for the number people quote, 15 to 16.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people they like to know those numbers for the ethics of it, and if that's the way you go about it, I'll give you a thumbs up because if obviously if you can do it with 1,200 or 1,000 or 900, if you don't feel comfortable under that, then you're being ethical, and that's the first step of being a good hunter is being ethical. But now we get to the king of the magnums, as they say, the 300 Winchester Magnum, an 165 grain TSX. Once again, that's a very quality bullet. At all these feet per second, it will expand. 30 foot-pounds of recoil. That's getting noticeable. You can tame that with a muzzle brake, but most of the time, if you're shooting a Magnum, you can handle it. So without a muzzle brake, um, but 0 yards, 3,120 feet per second. Foot-pounds of energy is 3,567. No noticeable drop because it's the beginning of the arc, obviously. 100 yards, 2,900 feet per second. Foot-pounds of energy is 3,081. And you are 1.1 and a third inches high, 200 feet per second, 2,690 feet per second. Foot-pounds of energy is 2,652. That's your 300 feet or 300 yards, 2,490 feet per second. Foot-pounds of energy, 2,273. 6 inches of drop. Obviously, it's better than the 7 millimeter Remington Magnum. 400 yards, 2,299 feet per second, 1,937 foot-pounds of energy. Still well above what the experts say is needed. Um, your drop only 17.85 inches. Oddly, that's the best one. And then you get to I believe it's the most well used Magnum for grizzly bear because this thing anchors. When it hits, it anchors whatever you're shooting. If it's obviously within range, it's going to anchor a deer. Um, going to do whatever you need it to do with shot placement. At muzzle, 3,300 feet per second, a whopping 4,351 foot-pounds of energy. No noticeable drop. Once again, 33 foot-pounds of recoil. That's getting up there. That's not pleasant, especially if you're shooting all day. That's very costly, and it's also going to hurt your shoulder without a muzzle brake. So keep that in mind. 100 yards, 3,000 feet per second with its 180 grain AccuBond. Foot-pounds of energy, 3,596. 1.5 inches high, you might as well call it. 200 yards, 2,770 feet per second. 3,066 foot-pounds of energy. And that's your 300 yards. Feet per second of 2,515. 2,527 foot-pounds of energy. Roughly 300 more than the 300 Win Mag, but you're also considering a heavier bullet. It's moving faster, so that's expected. Only 5.8 inches of drop, almost the same as the 300 Win Mag. And then the 400 yards, 2,278 feet per second. Energy of 2,073 foot-pounds of energy and about 18 and a half inches of drop. And then you start to see the ballistics of it. That's most likely has a little bit to do with the smaller bullet, I'm assuming, for keeping a better flight. But yeah, if you're gonna go with a Magnum, um, I would recommend the 338 Winchester Magnum. The recoil, it's only 3 foot-pounds and an 8 pound rifle. Um, that's basically considering the 338 Winchester Magnum that you have is capable of being shot. I've seen one recently that is not capable. Well, and you can shoot it. You can shoot it. You mess with have a little bit of fun with that. We had an incident with a 238 Win Mag, or at least that's what the barrel said. Um, I don't know if we can pick this up here, but there, right there, is a 338 Win Mag. This right here is also, oh, it disappeared on you. Disappeared on you again. That right there also is a 338 Win Mag. So you can see it's the same length, but it expanded. The brass expanded. We'll talk about that on another time because we don't have the time to do that. That's a whole video in and of itself. We can do a sit down to talk about that because
Yeah.
probably that will do it justice.
Now, the real reason Will's not talking about it in this video is I still need time to take that case to Sammy and get that thing spec'd because that's our new Turbo Magnum we just come up with.
Yeah, we will we can't let that out. That's 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 going to be the ultimate part. That's going to be the most versatile thing. Uh, but okay, now to the fifth cartridge. This one right here, as you see down here on the Excel sheet, the most versatile cartridge. We've talked about this one a little bit on the podcast. I had one of these built, and I'll be honest with you. When we see the numbers here, you're going to be shocked. This, to me, is the most versatile cartridge if you want to start shooting big game animals in North America. Because you'll see. Obviously, we don't have a live chat, so nobody can guess, but let us know down in the comments below if you know what this one is. It Part of his name has already been seen, but we'll get to it. We are at the 280 Ackley Improved, shooting 150 grain Sierra Game Kings. Now, I will notice the Sierra Game King is a bullet, very hard to find. If you have some on hand, you're a very lucky fellow.
Yeah.
I can't find them. I don't. I think they discontinued them. But here we are. We will talk about the 280 Ackley Improved. Um, to give you a little bit of history on it, it's based off the 280 Remington. That's a great cartridge in and of itself. Like many things that are good that don't take off for whatever reason, I think you had the 270 to compete with. You had the 30-06, two cartridges that have been known for a while. So obviously, the, sometimes when you are in that trying to compete, people looked at it as, why do we need it? Like, I believe it was originally the 7mm-06, and then the 7mm Remington Express, I believe so. So it's the 280 Ackley Improved is based upon the 280 Remington. P.O. Ackley obviously straightens out the sidewalls, sharpens the shoulder to 40 degrees. You have more powder capacity. You're keeping the powder in the case for a longer period of time. You're getting a more even flow out it as you're projecting the projectile. And then that's the science behind it. Did I hit everything? on it?
Yeah. One other interesting aspect that wasn't thought of then. So Ackley was, mainly focusing on case capacity and efficiency. If you look at stuff like your 6.5 Creedmoors and your 22 Creedmoors, that shoulder to neck geometry is getting close to what Ackley had cooked up, and uh, they've been really finding out in a lot of target shooting disciplines that shoulder and neck geometry will actually improve accuracy because of the way that the bullet lets out of the case and the way the case expands in the chamber. It allows for more consistency there as well. So,
Yep.
yeah,
Yep. So what you're doing also, you're getting better brass life. Um, you're also you're improving upon velocity. Now, some of the Ackleys, um, I like the concept of it. Some of the cartridges, like 30-06, you don't really see much of a difference. Ackley will even write, he writes in his books about which cartridge not to Ackley. For me personally, I think it's a cool concept. If you're a reloader, you might why not Ackley everything you have because you get that brass life. You're picking up at least some type of feet per second difference. On average, it's like 100 to 150. Some people don't look at that as a whole lot, but reloaders know you can push that, and you can do it. You can push that safely. Um, the Ackley cases how they can handle more pressure. I think that's another thing. But with the 280 Ackley improved, that's one of his better ones. At 0 yards, you're getting 3,100 feet per second, 3,200 foot-pounds of energy, no noticeable drop. 100 feet or 100 yards, 2,980 feet per second, 2,958 foot-pounds of energy, and you're 1.5 inches high. 200 yards, 2,748 feet per second, 2,514 foot-pounds of energy. That's your zero. 300 yards, 2,446 feet per second, 1,993 foot-pounds of energy. And then you're at 4.7 inches of drop. That is very flat. 400 yards, 2,230 feet per second, 1,656 foot-pounds of energy, and then 17.2 inches of drop. That may be, besides the 300 Win Mag, the flattest shooting of everything we've seen here so far. But why do I consider this the most versatile? One, you're flatter shooting than the 30-06. You're getting more energy than the 30-06. Your sectional density is better than the 30-06. You are shooting a 7 millimeter bullet. It's the king of BC. It's the king of sectional density. So that's another thing. But the biggest thing is the 19 foot-pounds. That's very manageable. It's less than the 30-06. So what are we doing here? We are getting these great ballistics numbers, and they are matching, if we go back here, the 7 millimeter Remington Magnum. Now, this is using 150 grain Sierra Game King. This is using 160 grain TSX. And in a lot of those categories, drop, it beats it. Energy out there, it's beating it. So, feet per second, it is beating it. You're getting Magnum levels with less recoil, better brass life, less powder. Why would you not? Like it's a fun rifle to shoot. Like why would you not do it? It's the most versatile cartridge, at least in my opinion, for big game. It can take down anything from a coyote to a grizzly bear with shot placement, doing everything the right way, ethically. So if you are looking to hunt everything pronghorn, the sheep, elk, mule deer, whitetail, hogs, the 280 Ackley is it's to me it's the best all-round versatile cartridge, but that's just my opinion. I've rambled a lot. This is the standard side of it. You're gonna see something a little bit better. Let me stop sharing here. Then we can switch right over. You're going to see something a little bit more fun for you.
Yeah,
But
now I do have to say up front, I didn't fully understand the assignment. So when Will sent me over the spreadsheet, he said, "Hey, this is how I'm doing it." I didn't notice he had multiple tabs, and then he was comparing cartridges. I thought, he was listing, he liked the 223 and he liked the 2250 and the 22250 Ackley improved. So missed the assignment on that. So my spreadsheet not as detailed, we'll say, but hopefully just as fun. You just give me 1 second here to get this pulled up.
yeah, can you? I don't. I might have to give you permission to screen share. Let me figure this out. Don't know. If not, you can try screen sharing. If you can't, then I can pull it up too, since I have it on my
Okay,
laptop.
give me 1 second. Yeah. Okay, let's see here. Okay. Looks like it might let me do this.
Oh, yep, it's letting you do it.
Oh, yeah, okay. Can you guys see that?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, so when we saw that comment come through from Shoot Straight, I truly took it as all game. So I base it off of what's legal here in Pennsylvania, because for the majority of other states, barring places that require straight walls, I have no straight walls listed here, uh, other than the 22 mag you see there. This would be legal to hunt anything in this state. I started with two very practical options, as you can see. One, we got the 22 WMR. I picked this particular bullet and that particular rifle, the CZ457, because really that's the rimfire I have the most experience with. It's kind of hard to believe, but this is the truth. I have shot more 40 full power, 44 Magnum rounds in my life than I have 22 long rifle. I'm not a 22 rimfire guy. I don't shoot rimfire. The whole reason I bought this rifle was to hunt small game. I hunt squirrel with this. I hunt rabbit with this. And you're probably thinking, well, 22 mag's a bit much for those. But when you go for headshots and you have the appropriate ammo, we do have a short that will be coming up on the channel here soon to kind of demonstrate. 22 mag is perfectly acceptable for those game animals. And here in PA, most small game species, like squirrel, for example, rabbit, if you're hunting with rifle, it has to be a rimfire. You cannot use center fire ammunition. So we got our CCI 40 grain game points. It's a little soft point there. Very, very, very marginal amounts of recoil, 0.92 foot-pounds. A lot of guys say train your kid on a 22 long rifle. It's just as acceptable to train them on a 22 mag. These recoil numbers that I have, I actually calculated using the weights of the rifles. So with these rifles, this is the recoil you will see with this ammo. So instead of going to 400 yards, for this one I went to 100 because I'd never shoot this 22 mag over 50 reliably. So we went up to 100, and you can see we start at 1875 feet per second, dropping down to 1385. Energy's 312 down to 170. And that drop chart is basically what you're going to see shooting it. Then you'll see a negative 1.5 inch for all of these at the muzzle. And that's because the drop calculator I used was taking into account a standard height over bore of your sight of 1.5 inch, which if you go to any calculator, that's like the base number that's in there. So you see you're within an inch out to 75 yards, and then you're on your zero. Uh, Makes it a very flat shooting cartridge. If you dial in 100 yard zero, squirrel heads obviously a little bit smaller, but when you start getting up into something the size of a rabbit, a groundhog, you can reliably hit that animal from the muzzle to 100 yards without really having to worry about holdover, which is another reason why I went with 22 mag over some of the other options. Getting out of the rimfire, because really what we're interested in is center fire stuff, right? Probably the most versatile thing that I could think of. When I'm thinking versatility, I'm also thinking like the availability of the ammunition. 270 Winchester, at least for now, you can still find that everywhere. It's slowly petering out. It doesn't have that heat it's had all this time, but it's still there. It's still got heat, probably at least for the next 30, 40 years, unless we start hunting with rail guns. You'll be able to find your 270. So I went with the 270, and I went with a Savage Axis rifle. Once I get my channel going, I'm going to have a whole series up on us modifying a Savage Axis rifle and discussing why I like that rifle package the most. But out of all those budget-friendly, you just want a hunting rifle with no frills. The Axis, in my opinion, is really just the best you can get, because as you decide, okay, man, I want a little bit more here and there, you can really customize these things and do some cool stuff. So getting into the ammo, I thought this was interesting. I also picked a Federal Trophy Copper round here, the 130 grain. They start at 3,060 at the muzzle. That's what Federal claims. All these are the claims of the ammunition manufacturer. I will leave that disclaimer there. So starting at 3,060, when you get out to 400 yards, you're looking at 2,275 feet per second. Energy level starts at 2,703, peters down to 1,497. Drop out at range is 18.44 inches. For me, if I was using a 270 with that particular ammunition, especially because I know how the copper bullets work, we're within its expansion threshold, it's going to do its job. I would be comfortable shooting elk at 400 with this ammo. We're going to get the penetration and the expansion we need, and the energy on the animal still in that magical 1,600 number it's quoted. So even from that perspective, if you're a guy that looks at those numbers, you're 3 foot-pounds of energy off. I don't think the elk's going to notice. Now, this is where we start getting fun. So I will say, as I was coming up with this list, I had to set a couple of restrictions on myself, or we'd really be getting into some trouble. So for me, there was no obsolete black powder stuff, no wildcats, and no obsolete cartridges in which you could not find ammunition anymore. So everything you see here, you can get online and buy the ammo today. And you might be able to find a rifle. That part, that's where we're going to get iffy. So a lot of guys like shooting milsurp rifles. I do too. And a lot of the more popular milsurp rifles from World War II are all in the same wheelhouse of power. You're in between the 308 and the 30-06 level of energy. Perfectly acceptable to hunt with them. If I was going to pick one of them to hunt with out of the Mauser, the Mosin, I hunt with the Mosin. I love hunting with the Mosin. Looking at like the Krag Jorgensen, the Springfield rifle. I would personally be taking The Waffenfabrik K31, it's a Swiss K31 rifle, straight pull bolt. Back in Europe, the straight pulls are still very popular because like we use lever actions here, or used to on running animals. Doing our putting on drives. They do driven hunts. Same concept. They use straight pull bolt rifles. The K31 is one of those, albeit it was a military rifle. Shoots a cartridge called the 7.5 by 55 Swiss. And despite the goofy nomenclature there being a 7.5, it actually uses .308 diameter bullets. So as a reloader, you can do some cool stuff with this cartridge. Factory bullets are more in a 0.306 diameter range, but .308 bullets will go down the bore no problem. That 0.02 of an inch doesn't matter as long as you're working up your loads correctly. There is factory ammo available. There's one hunting load, and that is the 180 grain normal Oryx. You can see there recoil energy. Well, I didn't talk about that on the 270. You're looking at 21 foot-pounds, pretty much the exact same number Will saw with his ammunition he picked. And that's with the Savage Axis weight of 6.6 pounds. So right in there with what Will said, that's the reliable number you'll see in the field. The 7.5 Swiss out of the K31, heavier rifle, 8.8 pounds. 19.52 foot-pounds recoil energy. This cartridge in this particular chambering here, this loading, is just a speck over a 308. 308, you're looking at 26 to 2620 when you get into these 180 grain bullets. Here we're at 2690. Obviously, reloading, you can change those numbers one way or the other. But that's about the comparison you'd see there. Dropout at 400 yards is fairly substantial, 27.57 inches. That's not what this thing was designed for. Typically, when you find these Milsart rifles, they're iron sight only. There were some few scope models, but you're paying out the wazoo for those. And they were usually designed to engage man-sized targets out to about 300 meters reliably. So going out to 300 yards, which isn't far off from 300 meters, we're looking at a drop of 9.35 inches if we're zeroed at 200 yards. And the ladder sight, you can adjust that to 300 and be zero. So when I shoot the iron sights that far, no. This is a woods gun. These, to me, are all woods guns. 100 yards, I can shoot iron sights pretty reliably. And within there, you could drop pretty much any animal you're running into in the United States. At 100 yards, you're still looking at over 2,000 foot-pounds of energy. Plenty of juice to drop whatever you might run into, be it deer, bear, elk. It's going to do the job for you. It's going to do it well. And it's Milsart. You go out and you got all these guys with these synthetic stocks. Maybe you've got, Will over there with his 760 Game Master. But it's not too often to run out and a guy with an old Milsart rifle shoot deer with it. So it's always a good feeling when you bag something with one of those. Moving on from the Milsart, so we're starting to get out there, but we're still in a level of practicality in terms of power. Same thing here, though, in my opinion. Now we're starting to hit the ragged edge. I also had to pick at Magnum, and for me, it's the 257 Weatherby Magnum. I personally own one of these. I've used it in the field, and I'm going to attest to the damage that these rifles are capable of doing with the bullet I've picked here, this 100 grain Bars TTSX. 25.28 foot-pounds of recoil energy. That's with a Weatherby Vanguard that specs in at about 7 pounds. That's in the recoil level of a 30-06, but with substantially more shoomp, as they say. Your muzzle velocity, this is with factory Weatherby ammo. We find that this is one of those rare occurrences where reloaders can't really match the factory ammo. Usually we're about 100 feet per second off of the Weatherby factory loadings. Um, I've safely hit 3,500 with this same bullet in my Vanguard. The factory ammo is 70 feet per second more. But, that's pretty substantial 100 grain bullet flying at 3570. And the energy foot pounds is 2830. Where this cartridge really starts to shine is when you start getting out at distance. Will showed several magnums. He showed the 280 Ackley, and the 280 Ackley was the flattest cartridge he had there at 17 inches of drop at 400. This 257 Weatherby out to 400 is still going 2,477 feet per second. It's starting to lose a lot of energy now. We're down to 1363. I'd still be comfortable shooting elk, bear with this cartridge out at that distance, especially with that TTSX bullet. Ron Spomer shot a black bear at, I want to say it was like 200 yards, 250 yards, shot through an elder tree branch and anchored the bear with this caliber and that bullet. So, plenty capable. But you're looking at 14 inches of drop, 14.27 inches of drop. That's very respectable. And that, all of these numbers we're seeing here is why this was one of Roy Weatherby's, in fact, it was his favorite cartridge. It was really flat shooting. It was incredibly fast, incredibly accurate. It is a very accurate round, which some Weatherbys are and some aren't. This one, fortunately, is one that, it shoots like a freaking laser beam. And because it shoots so flat, it's got so much velocity. Back when he invented this in the late 1940s, Roy went to Africa, shot a Cape buffalo with it, and killed it. This was before bullet technology existed to do such things with 25 calibers. Really impressive stuff. Now, we've gotten through 4. All of them, despite how goofy some might be, have some level of practicality. I think we can all agree with that. I know guys, including myself, that hunt with milsurps and the 257 Weatherby, and obviously 22 mag and 270 very pop. But I couldn't let us go without something absolutely stupid. And stupid I picked because we've covered animals up to and including large grizzly bears, but we've not talked about the largest North American game animal, the bison. The bison does exist, and per Shoot Straight, he wants to know about all game-sized animals in North America, and I would say it is a game animal, and therefore it's game-sized. What are we shooting a bison with? None of the above. I plan on going on a bison hunt at some time, and I'm always looking and talking with guides out west that take you on bison hunts. And one reoccurring thing I see is that guys think they're overgunned and they're actually undergunned. So I can remember this was very recently. The one guide shared a story that a guy was shooting 300 real heavy bullets, should have done the job. It took like 4 shots to take down this bison because you're shooting a 2,000-pound animal. It's like you're shooting a small sedan. You can't use your long range deer gun on an animal like this. You got to use a big game gun. And so my pick here is the 376 Steyr out of the Steyr Scout. There's a lot of choices I could have picked here. 376 uses a 375 diameter bullet. So its closest common, we'll say, comparison would be the 375 H&H mag, in which it's about 200 feet per second slower. When you look at the energy numbers, it's pretty negligible considering, you're hitting the animal with 4,000 pounds of muzzle energy. It's going to do the job. It's going to do the job on elephant. This cartridge was designed so the Steyr Scout could be used in Africa for big and dangerous game hunting. And it comes with a price, 43.37 foot-pounds of recoil, and that's out of the Scout, which comes in at a 7.7 pounds, I believe it was. But boy, are those numbers out to 200 impressive. Out to 200 yards, we're seeing anywhere from 4,000 to 2,789 foot-pounds of energy. Pretty substantial, considering our Weatherby is 2830 at the muzzle. We're at 2789 out at 200 yards. This is with 270 grain Hornady interlocked, which is one of two factory options you can get. Hornady does make a training round, which is a 225 grain bullet going the same speed to lessen the recoil on you. So I could get on Midway and buy this today. I checked it is in stock. So still within my parameters. The velocity, obviously, not great. This is not designed for long range shooting. Looking at 2,600 at the muzzle, and it bleeds off fast because we got a very heavy bullet that doesn't have a great ballistics coefficient. So it's like throwing a brick. Speed's gonna drop off very quick. But much like getting hit with a brick, it's gonna put you down if it gets you. I had the great misfortune to shoot one of these rifles, and I say that not because it was a brutal rifle to shoot. I say it because after shooting one of these, I've got to spend $3,000 to buy one now. I loved everything about that rifle. It's a very ergonomic rifle. It's got a built-in bipod system, spare magazine holder in the stock. Just everything about this rifle is cool. The cartridge has got all the knockdown power you need for the biggest North American game. Not a whole lot more to really say on it, other than one cool thing. If you wanted to drop $3,000, and you didn't want to buy another rifle after this, there's quite an array of bullet options for reloaders. So you can genuinely make this a bit more realistic for other game animals, other than like your big grizzlies or bison. 250 grain CX. It's going to do some meat damage, but I wouldn't have any qualm shooting an elk with that, especially with the velocity difference you'd be picking up. You could get it out there a little further if you're trying to stalk in on an elk. But even so, out to 300 yards, if you zero it at 2, you're still only looking at about 10 inches of drop. So here in PA, 300 yards, you could get within 300 on an elk pretty easily, depending on the terrain, of course. Ram, I don't know why you want to shoot ram, goats, and sheep and whatnot with this, but you can stalk within 300 yards of those. Bison, you're pretty much throwing a brick at a barn, so obviously you need to hit the vitals, but you got a big animal to aim at. Get within 200-300 yards, you'll easily be able to put this where you need to. Load the lighter bullets, and now shoot a deer with it if you want. I can tell you, I've hunted deer with my 375 H&H mag with that same 250 grain CX. I never saw one, so I can't tell you what it does. But eventually, might be able to come back here and have a story to tell on one of those.
Or film it for your channel.
Oh yes, be the quickest way to get a demonetized channel, blowing a deer in half. But a lot of guys, when they talk about overgun and how you're gonna blow the animal in half. Will mentioned the 338 Win Mag. I shot a deer with the 338 Win Mag. with those AccuBonds that he mentioned, actually, the 180 grain AccuBonds. Uh, the one thing with those AccuBonds, Nosler rates them at a maximum impact velocity of 3,100 feet per second because the bullet, even though it's bonded, will start absolutely tearing itself apart anywhere past that. So when I load those, I load them down the 2950 range. My last load, just the powder batch, they were coming in an average of 2920. And I shot a deer at about 50 yards with that. Had a hole, probably about yay big, right through the heart. The deer made it about 30 yards and it finally realized it was dead and flopped over. Probably wasted 5 pounds of meat if I had to guess. Uh, if you're shooting an animal, 5 pounds of meat for 10 seconds for that animal to die, I'll take overgun to over under any day.
Yeah. Yeah. Me too. I would rather have a little too much medicine and make sure I drop it ethically and at its best instead of, suffering and
That's there was a writer went by the name of Robert Rourke, and Robert Rourke, who some of his stuff they say was probably exaggerated, uh, but he was a big game hunter, and he wrote this book called "Use Enough Gun." Uh, in this book, Rourke preached the necessity of using enough gun. In a lot of cases, be overgunned because being undergunned, you run into all kinds of potential issues. And that's actually what started killing the 220 Swift, believe it or not, was Robert Rourke's book, Use Enough Gun. Because in this book, he talks about how many times he's seen game wounded being shot with the 220 Swift. And I got to remember the gentleman's name. See if I can't find it here. Yes, I found it. So there was an Alaskan hunter. I believe he was in Alaska. Just double check and make sure I'm not lying. I know he was up north. Yes. He was called Alaska's Wolfman. His name was Frank Glaser. Frank shot all assortment of number of animals while he was working up in Alaska. He hunted, he did wolf calls, like calls. I'm talking like he shot a bunch of wolves. And for Frank, that 220 Swift was consistently the most reliable and quickest killing rifle that he ever employed, including on moose. The only thing that he didn't like using that 220 Swift on was the big grizzly bears. But he stopped a charging grizzly bear with this gun. No doubt about it. It worked. Shot placement. Frank was very, very, very good at what he did. So, it's important to note, we're talking about 270 Winchester, 280 Ackley. I got the big old 376 Steyr, I'm talking about there for bison, grizzly. If you have a smaller caliber rifle, I'm not talking like use a little 25 Winchester lever action, although a lot of guys have used those do pretty stupid things. If you're confident with your gun and it is a reasonable smaller caliber, like 220 Swift is a pretty big cartridge. There's no reason you need to run out and buy the latest and greatest Magnum Go up to a big 40 caliber, 50 caliber rifle. If you can use your rifle, make ethical shots with it. That's all that matters.
Yeah, that's all that matters. And I think Robert. Now, if I remember correctly, did Robert Rourke? He took the 220 Swift to Africa to hunt with it, correct?
In one of his stories, he claims to have used a Swift, and I think he was shot one of the big cats over there with it, and that was where one of his big complaints came from. Was it didn't kill this cat? I think he got injured. If the story is to be believed, a lot of Robert's stuff was thought to have been hyperbolized. Whether or not it's true or not, I don't know. I can't ask the guy how long he's been dead. But Frank was shooting moose with his and anchoring them. So you got to bring in to the discussion the quality of the shooters
Yeah.
here too. Uh, see, yeah, that's not it. There was a very popular cartridge used in Africa by genuine African game hunters. I'm trying to see what the British designation of it was. There it is. They used a rifle that was called the 275 Rigby. The 275 Rigby was used on everything in Africa. There were elephants that were killed with this 275 Rigby. Excellent British cartridge. You know what another name for the 275 Rigby is?
What's that?
It's the 7mm Mauser. It's identical. The British just started calling it the 275 Rigby when they were chambering rifles in it. So elephants have been killed with 7mm Mauser. Reliable. A lot of
Yeah.
elephants were killed with the 275 Rigby over the years. Um, it's all in the guy using the gun. One of my favorite stories, when people, especially when people bring up the energy foot pounds debate, 1,000 for deer, the 15 for elk, yada yada. Larry Kelly. Larry Kelly started Magnaport. This is the idea that you could cut holes in a gun's barrel to vent gas to reduce recoil. I have a Magnaported pistol. Will had the great misfortune of shooting this Magnaported pistol. It doesn't so much as help with recoil as it does with muzzle flip for follow-up shots, but it does do fairly decently in that regard. But anyway, Larry Kelly was a prolific handgun hunter. And with a 44 Magnum revolver, Larry Kelly killed an elephant. 44 Magnum revolver. So it's all in the quality of the shooter.
Yeah, I mean, if we can next deer season, we can take I don't know, 300 Remington Ultra Mag, go out to local state game lands, shoot a deer at 150 yards, hit it back on it, way back, might run. Who knows how far? If you don't hit vitals, you don't hit neck. It doesn't
Yep.
matter what you're using. They're gonna run. And um, it's funny. I was actually watching a Ron Spomer video today, and he was talking about he was speaking with a guy who had a 308, and for some reason he wasn't able to anchor deer. So he went out and got a 30-06. was shooting all these deer, but he was not getting them. He couldn't figure out why. That 30-06 can't, I'm not anchoring it, Ron. So I went out and bought a 300 Remington Ultramag. Now, surely I'm going to anchor that deer. Well, after a while, Ron saw him again and he said, "So, how'd you make out with your new rifle during deer season?" He said, "The first day, a doe walked out in front of me. I shot it and it ran into the woods and I never found it." Now, it's not the 308's fault. It's not the 30-06 fault. Not the 300 Rum's fault.
Yep.
It is shot placement. Now, if you can't drop a deer with a 300 Rum, I'm going to ask you multiple questions. One, why are you shooting a 300 Rum if you can't effectively shoot a deer with a 30-06? Two, why are you hunting? Why are you not practicing?
That's one of the things that gets me, but we see it so frequently. Uh, the average deer hunter, the vast majority of them shoot their guns once a year. They sight the rifle in, and that's it. Now, in the vast majority of cases, that's fine. That works. Most guys in this day and age in America, obviously getting to Europe, hunting's different. Driven hunts are more popular. But here in America, hunting from a blind is quickly becoming, if not now, the most popular method of hunting. Sit and wait. So you've got time to steady your shot, make sure everything's good. It's pretty much like sitting at the bench and shooting. Or now you're starting to get some adrenaline because that 12-point buck just walked out in front of you.
Yeah.
Especially in this economy, it is getting more costly to shoot. But I am a firm believer that you need to be out practicing with your rifle. Yeah, I spend 100 rounds of ammunition just dialing in a load that I like, and then I'm practicing on top of it. And I think a lot more guys really need to sit down and really ask themselves, is the training that I'm putting in a lot of cases, the 5, 6 shots I'm shooting to make sure my gun's still sighted in with this ammo, is it enough for what I think I'm going to be doing?
Yeah, and then even on top of that, I don't think it's any secret to anyone, whether it's Pennsylvania, Ohio, out west, down south. Um, Hunters are just becoming more impatient, I think lazy. And I think especially you're going to get out of a hunting season what you put into it. You're going to be more inclined to be out hunting, not just getting out of the truck, walking 50 yards into the woods, sitting down on the tree line, not anywhere near deer. You're going to be more inclined if you're out practicing with your rifle, whatever that is to you. People obviously do different drills, shooting offhand, out to 100 yards, shoot, see what groups you can shoot if you're not studying yourself. If you're having trouble doing that, a quick, efficient, cost-effective way of doing that, they make these things called a shooting stick. They're like a bipod in a way. They're um, a monopod, I guess you would call it. You can set the height. It's not a dead rest, but you're going to be a lot more stable. And just practicing with your rifle, like you're saying, if I'm going out hunting, if I'm dedicating more time to hunting, sighting, well, making sure my rifle's sighted and testing out reloads for it, shooting it every other Saturday or whenever I can get to the range, and just taking more of an interest in that is going to put more of an interest in your hunting. You're going to find yourself spending more time in the woods. You're going to find yourself taking more pride in wanting to make a better shot because you're getting out of it what you're putting into it. And obviously that goes into doing other things such as your scouting, and spotlighting, doing all the different stuff you do if you hunt state ground, if public land. Obviously you're not going to be very successful if you just shoot your rifle once a year just to make sure she's sighted in. Then you drive up and walk out on state ground without doing any kind of scouting, without doing any kind of prep. And I know that's probably what the majority of riflemen or hunters are doing because they're just sighting in the rifle, going out, checking it once a year, might fire a group, if that, one shot. If it's close enough, okay, that's all I need. Then they go out the first day of deer season to sit on hunting land that they probably go to once a year. Well, and when I say once a year, I mean for a period of time. Once you might go there for a 2 week period, 1 week period, depending upon the amount of time you have to hunt. But if you're not putting in the time to practice to make sure you're as good as you can be with your rifle, you're not gonna have an interest in hunting. You're gonna end up probably not seeing anything, giving up too quickly, sitting back in your truck, and you're not gonna be successful. And then eventually you're not going to want to hunt. You're not going to want to shoot, and we want to avoid that. So if you can, just get out of it what you put into it. I don't know how many people I know who they shoot once a year. They go out. There's no deer in Pennsylvania. There's no deer here, but they go and sit 10 yards in the woods.
Yep.
What do you expect? You don't put if you didn't scout, if you didn't look for signs, if you didn't look for a buck rub, well, I don't know. I don't know.
I know guys that only have the opportunity to hunt state land. I can hunt private land, so I'm fortunate there. There's some benefit to that. But they're 50, 100 yards off the road. They've been hunting 2, 3 years now. They haven't seen a deer in that long, and there's no deer out here, and they'll blame everybody but themselves. I've seen people blaming the game commission. The game commission's out here shooting all these deer, and we can't find anything. That's legitimate stuff I've heard.
There,
Um, Now, once again, granted, I'm on private land, makes things a little bit better, but we're surrounded by hunters on this private land. Opening morning, it sounds like a Civil War reenactment out there because everybody's blessed. I get at least one a year, but I'm also not 50 yards off of a road or 100 yards off the road. I am up into the mountain. I this last year, I hiked to the top of the mountain one day. I must have been easily 400 or 500 yards elevation. I hiked up. And I got a beautiful picture standing up there at the top. But the amount of buck rubs, deer beds that I seen going up this one trail that I just found like, it kind of looks like maybe animals were coming through this trail. Boy, howdy, I see activity up there. The deer, especially after the first day when they start hearing all these gunshots and they're hunkering down, you need to be where they are. And it's not 50 to 100 yards off the road where the redcoats are sitting there shooting at the Yankees.
yeah, yeah, that's another thing. That especially for people, because I'm sure there's the majority of our viewers might be in Pennsylvania. Um, I would say this: the very first day of deer season, if if I'm going to make an excuse for the public land guy who sits 50 yards, 100 yards off the road, my opinion, I'm not rambling here. I'm just going to say one thing. Now, as far as bear hunting goes, I'm not a bear hunter, at least in Pennsylvania. I'd love to do it, but bear hunting is a little more difficult. Most people have big parties, put on drives. You have to almost pretty much know where there is a bear. But for me, at least, for, just to make not making an excuse for the public land guy who's lazy. Um, you got to get back in the woods farther because deer. I can tell you the deer on public land are already, at least in some areas, are already pushed back before the very first shot is fired on opening day. Only because the bear season in Pennsylvania pretty much nowadays is almost most areas running into rifle season. And when you have these hunters in the woods driving off, you ask any of them, they'll tell you we're seeing deer all over the place because they're pushing them back in. And then come the first day, there's no deer because you're not there's no time for them to get back into their pattern because once deer season ends, you have a couple days with Thanksgiving, and then but after that, you got the guys going out for the first time scouting. Their cars coming down the road, and the deer notice why is there instead of four cars coming down the road, why is there 40 cars down the road? So there's things you got to take into consideration. Now, that's just not making an excuse for them, but you got to get back in there. I understand physical fitness may affect your ability, and that I'm sorry if that's the case for you. But if you're a young guy who is capable of walking 400 yards to go back into the woods, do it. That's where you're gonna find your big buck. They're back in there. They're bedded down. They're only moving certain times of the day. That's where you're gonna find. You're not gonna find it sitting off the road. If you do, you find a deer. I mean, I give more power to you. I especially if you shoot a big buck 50 yards off the road. It's you go buy a lottery ticket because they don't get big being dumb. But that's just you gotta keep things in mind. It's not a science, it's a common sense. And if you're not putting in the common sense, and if you're not sitting in the woods on the first day, especially now in Pennsylvania with the laws, there people are getting antsy, they're getting impatient, they're driving a lot sooner than they should be. You're you're just you got to be sitting in the woods deep.
Yeah, and and that one point you made there too, Will, guys, you really need to consider your physical health. If you are not physically able, like you have a genuine disability, not physically able to get out into the woods, uh, that doesn't mean you don't have to hunt. Now, today, more than ever before, state game and wildlife agencies have opportunities for disabled individuals to be able to get out and use tools to enhance their mobility to aid in their ability to hunt. But if you're a younger guy, or Will and I are young, all things considered. Let's say you're in your late 40s, early 50s, even. If you're overweight, you smoke a bunch, you know, you're not able to get into the woods because you're so out of breath. You genuinely, and I'm not trying to rag on you guys, but you genuinely need to work on yourselves because it will improve the quality of your hunting. But most importantly, beyond improving the quality of your hunting, it's going to improve the quality of your life. If you're a guy that really enjoys hunting, once you like to be able to continue to do that in your 60s, 70s, 80s, I mean, look at Ron Spummer. Ron Spummer's in his early 70s now, and the guy's still hiking in the mountains and shooting sheep.
Yeah.
That's how I envision my life in the next 40 years. I still want to be able to go out and do those things because those are the things I enjoy. And being in the appropriate level of physical health to be able to go out and continue doing what you enjoy is going to keep you alive longer. It's going to keep your mental health in much better shape for much longer. Uh, you know, those of you that might not be from Pennsylvania listening in, um, there's a guy, he's very famous in the news right now. His name is Ray Swingle. And I'm saying his name because he is famous in the news. Everyone here from PA probably already knows what I'm talking about. Ray is 101 years old, and he is still out hunting. He, after his 101st birthday, he went out and got a buck with a crossbow this year here in Pennsylvania. Like, I can't imagine being alive at 101, let alone still being able to go out and hunt. And that's why taking care of yourself is so important.
Yeah. Yeah, especially you get these guys who like that. You got 80 year olds, going out climbing trees and doing all this different stuff and just doing great things, and there he is right there. Hmm. We're getting camping into glamping.
Oh yeah, I shared my forgot I was still sharing my screen. Yeah, so I was trying to find the video. WNEP did a coverage, and you can find this on YouTube on Ray Swingle. So there he is, and that's the buck. I was going to watch it afterwards. I forgot I was still sharing my screen.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys want to see a great story. This one right here, Ray Swingle. Good stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, especially, you see the guys like that. It's really a breath of fresh air because it'd be like you said, I couldn't imagine being 101 years old hunting, and
Here, I'll kill the
especially,
screen share while you're.
what's that?
I'll kill my screen share there while you're talking.
Yeah. But
How do
like
I?
as we still have it up here, that's especially that's a nice buck. That's a buck to be proud of. And, especially 101 years old, guys like that, putting all the young bucks to shame. Uh, Hold on 1 second. There you go. Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's really, a great thing to see. But I guess to get into another part of Mr. Shoot Straight's questions, because I like to please. He took the time to comment, have fun with his comments a little bit. Um, he talked about the myth of faster velocity always equals flatter shooting. I tried to point to that a little bit during the little presentation with Excel, the 30-06 and the 270. Did you want to touch more on why that's not always the case? Because I think some guys think it is, and
So, yeah, that's all a big relation to your bullet's ballistic coefficient. If I got a real bad BC bullet, I can launch that thing super fast. It's going to bleed velocity like crazy. I mean, a grand example. Now, granted, it wasn't going super fast, but that 376 Steyr that I had on my list, that thing from 0 to 100 yards lost 278 feet per second. That's a lot of feet per second. We go into the 270, which had a 130 grain bullet. So not the best BC bullet. It was that bullet, the BC's .459 on that 130 grain trophy copper. That only lost 210. So yeah, we're still lost quite a bit there, but not nearly as much as we lost with the 376 because the BC is better. So if we have a heavier bullet, or in just a general bullet with better BC, it is going to retain velocity. So there comes a point where, as we get out at range, it is retaining velocity at a rate greater than which the faster cartridge is losing, and they might start out looking like this, and you will find a point where this happens, and then your slower cartridge with the higher BC bullet is going to shoot better. Now, where that happens is the big question. That really depends on the starting velocities, the ballistic coefficients, usually within 400 or 500 yards. If the faster bullet is fast enough, it is going to remain the flatter shooting cartridge. If the starting velocities aren't off by much, that cross could happen sooner. But typically, once you get to 6 and beyond, is where we really start seeing those curves cross. And that's why, I picked the 130 grain trophy copper for my 270 bullet pick here. There were options that had better drop out at range, but we were looking in the 400-yard range, and because it was so much faster than the other options at 3,060 feet per second starting, it had better drop to 4. But once again, once you start getting into that, you need to ask yourself, how far do I plan on shooting? Now I need to start looking at what cartridges and bullet weights and BCs are going to start working to get my optimum performance at that range. Because one could do it within 400 and another could do it out past 400.
And then just to touch on that, if the idea of trying to figure out BC and all that stuff, if that intimidates you, I will say one thing that I do use a lot of is the Hornady. Hornady has a couple different apps. They have one for ballistics, one for reloading. You can, I think it's $9.99. You can get for the yearly subscription. You have access to all of Hornady's bullets. So on this screen here, you have the BC. Um, there's just on the 270 caliber. You have the BC. I'll hold it back here a little bit so you can see it better. But yeah, BC, the muzzle velocity range of it, and then they will even show you the game that you can use that on. So, like, for example, the lowest grain bullet that they made for the 270 caliber was and it's discontinued. It's the old Spire point, 100 grains. Their muzzle velocity range feet per second was between 3,000 and 3,800. Could you imagine moving a bullet out of a 27 caliber that fast? And another thing, speaking on like you have like the different graphs, and like you said, you start crossing. I think with that, with Excel, you have a really great tool. And I think at our range, like you were saying, out to 400 to 500 yards, that's where you might start to see it. You might see it sooner. Our range, we have about 300 yards you can shoot out effectively. And at 300 yards, you can probably mimic most hunting um, interactions, events that you might be in. What I think we could do is obviously with you're getting your channel and everything up and going, and the collaboration and everything, going forward because we're going to shoot and everything. It may be even developing over time, testing an Excel sheet, graphs, and just putting it out there. That way, people can look at it as a tool. Obviously, you can post it for free. It's out there. Just as an educational thing, I think really, so people can really see how flat things are, especially in hunting circumstances, and putting the bullets and publishing that out there. I just think that's a very efficient way. It's not that hard. It's basic recording of information and just doing something that can be very helpful for people because some guys are probably intimidated by the idea of shooting at 300-400 yards because they don't know. They get into BC sectional density, and if you don't know much about it, there's still a lot of stuff I need to learn about it. And just trying to educate and inform and all just becoming more well-rounded shooters, just to really preach the ethics side of it. Um, I think that's just something that could be done, especially 270, 30-06. We can 30 calibers. We can do all that different stuff with that. You can get a lot of charts out of the 30-06.
Yep. Yeah,
Um,
and that too, 30 out of 6 is so dang versatile. They make 110, 120 grain bullets that just zoom out of those.
yeah, yeah. I mean, like I said, just getting this tool here, you can pull up the 30 caliber. They go down to 100 grain short jacket.
Oh, the gallery bullet. Yeah.
Yep,
I
they're
didn't even
moving.
know they still made those.
Yeah, the muzzle velocity between 1,800 to 3,100 feet per second. The Vmax 110, 3,900 feet per second. You could move that. Would you
Yep.
want to do? It'd make for an interesting video. 110, 3,200. The Gmax, the CX 3,200. I mean, they got some real zooming stuff. You know, for white tails, you can get up into the 135 grain FTX 2,500 whitetail and varmint. Yeah, they got plenty of stuff for elk target shooting. I mean, I there's like I think Hornady has, I want to say, between their bullet powder combinations, ammunition for 30 cal. I think there's something like 98 different combinations out there for them. So I'm not going to go out and buy 98 different boxes of ammunition just to shoot, but you can do a lot of different stuff with reloading. So, the 30-06 may become a frequent vi- uh, visitor just because I mean, it's the cartridge everybody puts everything up against because, that's just something that I think it's standed the test of time. But I don't know. There's a lot of different fun stuff, especially, with you developing a channel. And, like I said, that'll be a lot of fun to see the stuff that you do and collaborations and, just education and all that. And I think just one final thing, Shoot Straight mentioned wildcatting. Um, I, it's a tough thing because there's a lot of stuff, there's a lot of time and effort that goes into it. Not very cost efficient unless you come up with something that takes over, like if the 25-06 or something like that, or you can do what P.O. Ackley did. There's pretty much everything has been done. As far as wildcatting, I've always been interested in it since I found out about it. Now that was right around the 280 Ackley when I found out about that. You're the one who introduced me to that side of things, so I don't have any experience doing it. I'd love to do it. We talked at the last time at the range, maybe developing something through Everything Firearms, coming up with something, but it has to be practical. Um, Now I know you have a little bit of experience doing that. I know you have some plans for that, so obviously don't want to put your idea out there or nothing, um, but yeah, I mean, if we do go that route of doing something, developing something over this, we can definitely do that. But it has to be something that makes sense.
since we originally talked on that bit of that project there, my gears have been turning, and I have a couple of ideas for parent cases to start with that people just really didn't hog around with. Um, why didn't people hog around with them? Well, there's like 20,000 other cartridges to mess around
Yeah.
with, so why pick this random one? So I picked this random one. So there's some things to discuss that could be used that I feel could possibly be practical. Um, one important thing to note is I have developed a Wildcat back when I was in business. It was actually something I was intending to take to one of the ammo manufacturers to go to Samuel. Still haven't tested it yet. I never got that far, but I got the barrel, everything. Like I had I've loaded ammo that test fits the chamber, ready to test. Just haven't put rings and a scope on the barrel yet. That will hopefully, when I test it, probably won't go anywhere now because I'm not actually running an FFL, but that particular cartridge should beat the 243 in energy, less recoil. So, we'll have to get out and play with that too at some point when I finally uh, get off my keister, get some rings and scopes, and do some testing.
I'll say one thing though. On the way up to the range, we talked about that idea, and maybe fate had it. Maybe fate. That's the Wildcat. This might be.
It's 475 inside diameter, right? I mean, look out, Willity.
Yeah, the
Wait,
full. Yeah, I mean that could be the they do like the 7 Remington Express or whatever, where you hear the Express or whatever. I mean, it could be 475 McHenry Stevenson Express, a sidewall with a belt.
so well, yeah.
And
Oh,
fire formed it. Perfect.
yeah. We just need to rip off a few more of those so we got more brass to test fit. And
I'm I'm not gonna be the guy ripping it off. Well, we'll have to figure that out. Once again, if you have any topics you want us to discuss next time, just let us know down below, and we'll see you on the next one.